If you were faced with the sounds of suffering coming from behind a fence, would you walk away or investigate? Prepare yourself for a moving story of abandonment and rescue, a journey through heartbreak and hope that will change how you see the suffering that exists just beyond our daily routines. This incredible bond between a forgotten soul and an everyday hero reminds us that compassion can emerge in the most unexpected moments. In rural Millfield, Ohio, where properties sit far from winding roads and privacy is guarded by woodlands, the line between seclusion and neglect often blurs. Quiet back roads hide stories of abandonment behind tall fences and no trespassing signs. Stories that remain untold unless fate and compassion intersect on the same path. Ray Martinez was just a 37-year-old delivery driver with 13 years at the same company, navigating rural routes day after day. His life followed a predictable rhythm of packages and deadlines, with weekends reserved for his 2 children after a divorce 3 years prior. Ray had learned to find contentment in life's simple routines, never expecting to become anyone's hero. The dog, later named Bruceau, had known nothing but a heavy chain and the oak tree to which he was tethered for what authorities would estimate to be at least 6 months. The once proud German Shepherd mix, with intelligent eyes and a now matted coat, had been reduced to a skeletal frame, his muscles wasted from malnutrition and limited movement, his spirit dimmed by constant exposure to the elements. That first week of March brought an unseasonable cold snap across the Midwest, affecting both Ray and Bruceau for different reasons. Ray's route expanded to cover a co-worker's illness, adding unfamiliar stops to his packed schedule. Meanwhile, Bruceau huddled against his tree, curled against the biting wind with no shelter, his water bowl frozen solid, his body trembling with exhaustion beyond mere cold. The property at the end of Willow Creek Road wasn't on Ray's usual route, a forgotten address with a dilapidated mailbox at the entrance to a long, unpaved driveway. The package required a signature, forcing Ray to approach, despite the fading daylight and his fatigue after 12 hours on the road. He turned down the driveway, his truck bouncing over deep ruts as bare branches scratched at the vehicle. Something felt wrong immediately. The dark windows of the weathered farmhouse, the overgrown yard with rusted appliances, the silence broken only by whistling wind. The undisturbed snow covering the front steps suggested no one had used this entrance in weeks. After 3 unanswered knocks, Ray reluctantly began the protocol for undeliverable packages requiring signatures. As he turned to leave, a sound caught his attention, faint but unmistakable in the rural twilight, coming from behind the property. Ray paused, his breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. There it was again, a weak, rasping bark, followed by the metallic jingle of a chain. Despite company policy against trespassing and his delayed schedule, Ray found himself drawn toward the sound. Following a narrow path around the house, Ray navigated through knee-high weeds, using his phone's flashlight in the deepening Bruceaus. The pitiful sounds grew stronger, now punctuated by a faint whine. Rounding a decrepit shed, Ray's light fell upon a sight that would haunt him. A severely emaciated dog chained to a massive oak, lying on frozen ground with no shelter, no food, and an overturned frozen water bowl. "Oh my God," Ray whispered as he approached cautiously. The dog, so thin his bones protruded sharply beneath his dull coat, raised his head with visible effort, eyes reflecting the flashlight with a glimmer between fear and desperate hope. A heavy, rusted chain tethered him to the tree, allowing barely enough movement to circle the trunk. His neck raw and infected where the collar had rubbed away fur and skin. Ray checked his phone. No service in this remote location. The dog had managed to sit up, legs trembling, his tail offering a hesitant, weak wag that broke something open in Ray's chest. He crouched down, keeping a respectful distance while speaking gently. "Hey, buddy, who did this to you? How long have you been out here alone?" The temperature was dropping rapidly as darkness claimed the landscape. Ray knew the dog wouldn't survive another night in his weakened condition. Company protocol said finish the route, return the truck, report the situation. A process that would take hours, likely too late for the suffering animal. Looking into the dog's eyes, Ray made a decision against every company rule and his own careful nature. "Hang on, I'm getting you out of here," Ray promised, retrieving bolt cutters from his emergency kit. With trembling hands, he approached again, speaking reassuringly as the dog watched with wary hope too weak to show fear. This is probably against a dozen regulations, but some rules need breaking, don't they, boy? The chain resisted at first, years of rust having sealed the links, requiring all Ray's strength to cut through. When it finally gave way, the dog seemed confused by sudden freedom, attempting to stand on legs that immediately buckled. Without hesitation, Ray removed his uniform jacket, wrapped it around the trembling animal, and lifted him with surprising tenderness. The dog weighed frightfully little, his body all angles where curves should have been. "I've got you now," Ray whispered against the dog's matted fur as he carried him toward the truck, feeling shallow breaths against his neck and a weak tail thump against his arm. "You're safe." Climbing into the heated cab, Ray knew he had reached a point of no return, a moment when looking away ceased to be an option, when rules fell away in the face of moral clarity. Whatever consequences awaited, Ray Martinez had just committed to saving this dog's life, a decision that would transform both their destinies in ways neither could imagine. The interior of Ray's delivery truck became a sanctuary of warmth as the heater blasted at full capacity, slowly thawing the nearly frozen dog. Bruceau lay across the passenger seat, still wrapped in Ray's jacket, his body shivering uncontrollably despite the rising temperature. "Just hold on, buddy," Ray murmured, one hand on the steering wheel, the other gently stroking the dog's head as he navigated the rural roads in deepening darkness, his delivery route abandoned in favor of a more urgent mission. Ray's mind raced through his options, each seeming less viable than the last. The county animal shelter would be closed at this hour, the nearest emergency vet was over 40 miles away, and his company's strict policy against unauthorized stops, let alone transporting animals in delivery vehicles, hung over his head like a guillotine. His phone's GPS indicated he was still in a dead zone, preventing him from calling for advice or assistance. The dog's condition deteriorated visibly as Ray drove, his breathing becoming more labored, his trembling more pronounced. A small whimper escaped Bruceau's throat, causing Ray to press harder on the accelerator, all thoughts of speed limits temporarily forgotten. "Stay with me," he pleaded, the emotion in his voice surprising even himself. "We've got to get you help right now, rules or no rules." The lights of Riverside Animal Hospital appeared through the falling snow like a beacon, the 24-hour emergency services sign glowing red against the white landscape. Ray pulled into the parking lot with a spray of gravel, scooping Bruceau into his arms and rushing through the front doors, still wearing his delivery uniform, the dog still wrapped in his company jacket. "Please," he called out to the startled receptionist, "this dog needs help immediately. Doctor." Ellie Chen was just finishing with another patient when the commotion reached her ears, prompting her to hurry into the reception area where she found Ray standing with the emaciated dog cradled against his chest. "Someone chained him outside and abandoned him," Ray explained breathlessly, as the veterinarian quickly ushered them into an examination room. "I found him on my delivery route. I think he's been out there for days without food or water." The examination revealed the horrifying extent of Bruceau's condition: severe dehydration, hypothermia, muscle atrophy, infected wounds around his neck, and a body weight approximately half what it should be for a dog his size. "He's in critical condition," Dr. Chen explained, her face grave as her assistants rushed to start IV fluids and warming protocols. "Honestly, a few more hours out there in this cold, and he wouldn't have made it." As the veterinary team worked frantically to stabilize Bruceau, Ray paced the small examination room, his phone now showing service but remaining clutched unused in his hand. He should be calling his supervisor to explain the abandoned deliveries, should be arranging for another driver to complete his route, should be worried about the consequences to his job, his only source of income as a single father. Instead, he found himself unable to focus on anything but the dog's labored breathing. "I need to be honest with you," Dr. Chen said, returning to the room after Bruceau had been moved to the intensive care unit. "His recovery will be lengthy and expensive. Based on his condition, he's been neglected for months, not just days. The damage to his system is extensive." She hesitated, studying Ray's face. "Are you planning to take responsibility for him, or should I contact animal control?" The question caught Ray off guard. He had acted on instinct, driven by the immediate need to save the dog from certain death, without considering the long-term implications. He began, then stopped, the reality of his situation crashing down. His apartment didn't allow pets. His budget was already stretched thin supporting his children, and his job, which might now be in jeopardy, demanded long hours that would leave little time for rehabilitating a severely traumatized animal. "Can I have a moment to think?" Ray asked, stepping outside into the parking lot where snow continued to fall silently around his idling delivery truck. Company property he had essentially commandeered for an unauthorized rescue mission. The consequences were finally beginning to register. Potential termination, loss of income, inability to support his kids, all because he couldn't drive past a suffering animal. With shaking hands, he finally dialed his supervisor. The conversation with his supervisor, Dan, went exactly as poorly as Ray had anticipated. "You did what?" Dan's voice thundered through the phone. "You abandoned your route, took a company vehicle off course, and stole someone's dog? Have you lost your mind, Martinez? That's theft of property. Get that truck back to the depot now and pray I don't call the police myself." The call ended abruptly, leaving Ray standing in the silent snowfall, the weight of his actions pressing down like an anvil. Meanwhile, inside the clinic, Broussard was fighting his own battle, his fragile body struggling to respond to the treatments being administered. His temperature remained dangerously low, his heartbeat irregular, his body so depleted of resources that even the simplest recovery processes were compromised. The staff worked in quiet urgency, aware that despite their best efforts, animals in such extreme states of neglect sometimes lacked the strength to recover, their will to live extinguished long before rescue arrived. When Ray returned to the treatment room, his face ashen from the confrontation with his supervisor, he found Dr. Chen monitoring Broussard's vital signs with a concerned expression. "He's stabilizing, but still critical," she reported without looking up. "The next 12 hours will tell us a lot about his chances." She finally turned to Ray, noting his distress. "I take it your employer isn't supportive of your rescue mission?" "I'll probably be fired," Ray admitted, his voice hollow as he approached the treatment table, where Broussard lay connected to various monitoring equipment and IV lines. "But looking at him now, I still can't imagine having done anything differently." He gently placed his hand on the dog's head, careful to avoid the areas where the staff had shaved fur to insert catheters. "No job is worth driving away from something like this." Dr. Chen studied Ray for a long moment before reaching a decision. "I have a proposal for you," she said, gesturing for him to follow her into her office adjacent to the treatment area. "Every few months we encounter cases like Broussard, animals who need extensive rehabilitation beyond what their owners can provide, or who have been abandoned and have no one to claim responsibility for their care." She pulled out a form from her desk drawer. "We have a special fund for these cases, supported by donations from the community." Ray stared at the form Dr. Chen had placed before him, the words, "Emergency Care Sponsorship Program," printed across the top. "Basically, the fund covers the medical expenses, and we find foster homes for the animals during their recovery," she explained, watching his face carefully. "Given your current situation, you obviously can't take Broussard home tonight, but you could be listed as his sponsor, which gives you visiting rights and first option to adopt him if your circumstances change." For the first time since discovering Broussard, Ray felt a small measure of relief unfurl in his chest. "Yes," he said without hesitation, already reaching for the pen Dr. Chen offered. "I'd like to be his sponsor." As he filled out the form, providing his contact information and signing his name with a determined flourish, Ray felt a strange certainty settle over him, that despite the chaos he'd invited into his carefully structured life, he was exactly where he needed to be. The police cruiser waiting beside his delivery truck when Ray finally emerged from the clinic sent a jolt of panic through his system. An officer stood leaning against the vehicle, arms crossed, expression unreadable in the dim parking lot lighting. "Mr. Martinez," the officer called, straightening as Ray approached reluctantly. "I'm Officer Brennan. Your supervisor filed a report about an abandoned delivery vehicle. Said you'd gone rogue with company property." Ray's explanation came tumbling out in a rush of words, his hands gesturing expressively as he described finding Broussard chained to the tree, the dog's critical condition, the lack of cell service to call for help. To his surprise, Officer Brennan's stern expression gradually softened, particularly when Ray led him inside to glimpse the emaciated dog fighting for his life in the treatment area. "I'd have done the same thing," the officer admitted quietly, closing his notebook. "Let me handle your supervisor," You focus on getting home safely. By the time Ray finally reached his apartment, it was well past midnight. His neighbor, Mrs. Kaplan, who had agreed to watch his sleeping children when Ray called to explain he'd be late, waved away his profuse apologies and grateful attempts to pay her. "You saved a life tonight," she said simply, patting his arm before returning to her own apartment across the hall. That's payment enough for watching two sleeping angels for a few hours. The simple kindness brought unexpected tears to Ray's exhausted eyes. Sleep eluded Ray that night despite his physical and emotional exhaustion, his mind replaying the events of the evening like a film reel that refused to stop. Brousseau's desperate eyes in the beam of his flashlight, the weight of the emaciated dog in his arms, the veterinarian's cautious prognosis, his supervisor's furious voice, the police officer's unexpected support. By dawn, he had reached a strange clarity, a calm acceptance of whatever consequences awaited him at work. The text message from his supervisor arrived at 6:17 a.m., its brevity foreboding. Office, 8 a.m. sharp. With his children still asleep, Ray arranged another emergency childcare favor with Mrs. Kaplan, dressed in his only suit, the one he'd worn to his divorce proceedings, and drove to the delivery company headquarters with the solemn determination of a man approaching his own execution. The company had been his financial stability for 13 years. Losing it would devastate the careful balance of his life as a single father. Dan Sullivan, regional manager for Northeast Ohio deliveries, was waiting in the conference room with the human resources director, their faces equally impassive as Ray entered and took the seat indicated across from them. "Before you say anything," Ray began, his voice steadier than he'd expected, "I want you to see what I found yesterday." He placed his phone on the table, screen displaying the photos Dr. Chen had sent him this morning. Close-ups of Brousseau's condition, the infected neck wounds, the visible ribs, the chain marks embedded in flesh. A heavy silence followed as both executives examined the images, the HR director's hand unconsciously rising to cover her mouth. "The police report confirms the property was abandoned," Ray continued, seizing the moment. "The house has been empty for months. The dog was left behind, chained to a tree with no food, no water, no shelter in freezing temperatures. According to the vet, he wouldn't have survived another night." He leaned forward, meeting Dan's eyes directly. "I made the only choice I could live with." What happened next would later strike Ray as the first real miracle in a chain of unexpected events. Dan Sullivan, known throughout the company for his rigid adherence to protocol and legendary temper, removed his glasses, pinched the bridge of his nose, and sighed deeply. "My family had a German Shepherd when I was growing up," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Best dog I ever knew, loyal to the bone." He replaced his glasses, his expression shifting subtly. "The company has a zero-tolerance policy for unauthorized use of vehicles." Ray braced himself for the inevitable termination, mentally calculating how long his modest savings would last before he'd need to find new employment. "However," Dan continued, surprising him, "we also have a community impact initiative that's been gathering dust in the PR department for years. Something about corporate social responsibility." He exchanged a meaningful glance with the HR director, who was already nodding. "I think we've just found our first project." By noon, what had begun as a disciplinary meeting had transformed into an impromptu marketing brainstorming session. Instead of firing Ray, the company decided to leverage his rescue of Brousseau into a community outreach campaign, complete with a donation drive for the Animal Hospital's Emergency Care Fund and a partnership with local animal welfare organizations. "We're calling it Delivering Hope," the hastily summoned marketing director announced excitedly, with Ray and Brousseau as the faces of the initiative. Ray's head was spinning as he left the office, his job not only intact, but somehow enhanced with the additional responsibility of coordinating with the marketing team on the new campaign. The relief was so profound it left him lightheaded, necessitating a moment of stillness in his car before he could safely drive to the veterinary clinic where Dr. Chen had invited him to visit Brousseau during her lunch break. The world had tilted on its axis, yet somehow he had remained standing. Brousseau's condition had stabilized overnight, though Dr. Chen was quick to temper Ray's enthusiasm with cautious realism. "He's responding to treatment, but we're not out of the woods," she explained as she led Ray to the ICU kennel where Brousseau now rested. Still connected to IV fluids, but noticeably more alert than the previous evening. He's severely malnourished, and his immune system is compromised. Recovery will be measured in weeks, not days. When Brusau's eyes, warm brown and surprisingly gentle despite his ordeal, focused on Ray, something extraordinary happened. The dog's tail, a mere Brusau of its potential plumage, began to thump weakly against the kennel bedding. There was recognition there, undeniable and deeply affecting. This dog remembered the man who had freed him from his chain and carried him to safety. Ray found himself blinking back tears as he crouched beside the kennel, speaking softly. "Hey there, buddy. You're looking better already." Over the next several days, Ray established a new routine, visiting Brusau each morning before work and again in the evening, sometimes bringing his children on weekends once Brusau was strong enough for brief, calm interactions. 10-year-old Sophia and 8-year-old Miguel approached their first meeting with the recovering dog with solemn care, having been thoroughly briefed on his fragile condition and traumatic past. "He was so brave to survive," Sophia whispered, carefully offering Brusau her hand to sniff under Dr. Chen's watchful guidance. The decisive moment that would forever alter Ray's trajectory arrived unexpectedly, 3 weeks into Brusau's recovery. The dog had made remarkable progress, gaining weight, showing increased energy, his coat beginning to regain its luster with proper nutrition and gentle grooming. Ray arrived for his evening visit to find Dr. Chen waiting with an unusually serious expression. "Brusau's ready for foster care," she announced without preamble. "His medical needs can now be managed outside the hospital setting. We need to discuss his next steps." Ray had known this day was coming, had prepared himself for it repeatedly during his daily visits, had even helped review potential foster homes from the clinic's approved list. Yet faced with the imminent reality of Brusau moving on to another caretaker, he found himself unexpectedly devastated, a sense of loss sweeping through him with surprising intensity. "I wish I could take him," he admitted, watching Brusau dozing peacefully in his kennel, now free of medical equipment. "But my apartment building has a strict no-pets policy." "About that," Dr. Chen said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she handed him a folder. "The clinic's board of directors would like to offer you something in recognition of your role in our new partnership with Northeast Ohio Deliveries." Inside the folder, Ray found housing listings, pet-friendly apartments and small rental homes within his budget range, all within reasonable distance of both his workplace and his children's school. "Your company's donation drive has already raised enough to cover Brusau's remaining medical expenses. His future is the only piece left to secure." The small 2-bedroom house on Maple Street became Ray and Brusau's new beginning, a modest rental with a securely fenced backyard, located just 15 minutes from both the delivery company headquarters and the children's school. Moving day coincided with Brusau's release from the animal hospital, a synchronicity that felt like confirmation to Ray that despite the upheaval of the past month, everything was somehow falling perfectly into place. His children raced excitedly through the rooms, already planning where Brusau's bed would go in their shared weekend space. Brusau's first steps into the house were tentative, his newly regained strength still fragile, his trust in this new environment clearly tenuous despite his growing bond with Ray. The dog moved cautiously from room to room, sniffing corners and doorways, his body language showing signs of the hypervigilance common in abuse survivors. When he finally settled on the living room rug, curling into a tight ball near Ray's feet rather than exploring further, Dr. Chen nodded knowingly. "This is normal," she assured Ray. "Recovery is as much emotional as physical. Just be patient." The initial days of their new living arrangement brought challenges Ray hadn't fully anticipated, despite Dr. Chen's thorough preparation. Brusau's trauma manifested in various ways, cowering at sudden movements, panicking during thunderstorms, becoming distressed when Ray moved out of sight, and most heartbreakingly, hoarding food by carrying kibble from his bowl to hide throughout the house. "It's survival behavior," the veterinary behaviorist explained during their follow-up appointment. "He's still not convinced the food will be there tomorrow." Ray adapted his own routines to accommodate Brusau's recovery needs, setting his alarm 30 minutes earlier to allow for slower, calmer morning walks, installing a baby gate to create a secure space for the dog during his work hours, and researching trauma-informed training methods late into the night after Brusau had finally settled into sleep. The delivery company, still riding the positive publicity wave from the Delivering Hope campaign, approved a modified schedule that allowed Ray to come home during lunch breaks to check on his new companion. The first breakthrough came nearly 2 weeks after the move, during Miguel's weekend stay. Ray's son had been reading aloud from his favorite adventure book, stretched out on the living room floor, while Brusau watched from his designated safe corner, maintaining the invisible boundary he had established around himself. Without warning, the dog suddenly rose and crossed the room, settling hesitantly beside Miguel, his body still tense but his desire for connection finally outweighing his fear. Miguel, with instinctive understanding beyond his 8 years, simply continued reading, one small hand gently coming to rest on Brusau's back. Each small victory thereafter felt monumental. The first time Brusau accepted treats directly from Ray's hand, instead of waiting for them to be placed on the floor. The morning he voluntarily joined Ray on the couch, though perched cautiously at the far end. The afternoon he barked at the mail carrier, a normal dog behavior that indicated growing territorial security in his new home. Ray documented these milestones in the journal Dr. Chen had suggested he keep, each entry reinforcing that healing, while not linear, was indeed happening for both of them. Sophia's influence on Brusau's recovery proved particularly powerful, her natural empathy creating a space where the dog's defensive walls could safely lower. She invented a game where she would sit quietly, allowing Brusau to approach at his own pace for gentle interaction, never forcing contact, but always rewarding his bravery with soft praise. "He just needs to remember how to trust again," she explained to her father with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Like you did after Mom left." The comparison startled Ray, illuminating a parallel he hadn't fully acknowledged. How his own retreat from emotional connection following his divorce mirrored Brusau's withdrawal after trauma. How both had built protective barriers around their wounded hearts. That evening, watching Sophia and Brusau dozing together on the living room rug, Ray made a silent promise to himself and to the dog who had unexpectedly transformed his life. They would heal together, step by cautious step. Brusau's physical transformation accelerated alongside his emotional recovery. His once dull coat now gleamed with health, the proper nutrition and care allowing his true beauty to emerge. The infected wounds around his neck healed completely, leaving only faint scars hidden beneath luxurious fur. His body filled out to a healthy weight, muscle definition returning to his once skeletal frame. Most striking was the change in his eyes, the wary guardedness gradually replaced by a calm alertness, an engaged presence in the world around him. The Delivering Hope campaign expanded beyond anyone's initial expectations, the partnership between Northeast Ohio Deliveries and local animal welfare organizations generating substantial community engagement. Ray found himself reluctantly thrust into a spokesperson role, his straightforward account of finding Brusau resonating deeply with audiences at fundraising events and awareness programs. "I'm not a hero," he would insist whenever the label was applied. "I just couldn't walk away." Anyone would have done the same. 6 months after the rescue, the police finally located Brusau's former owner, a man now facing multiple animal cruelty charges based on evidence collected from the abandoned property, including the rusted chain Ray had cut that winter night. When asked if he wanted to make a victim impact statement at the upcoming trial, Ray hesitated before ultimately agreeing. "Not for vengeance," he explained to Dr. Chen during Brusau's annual checkup, "but because someone needs to speak for all the animals who don't get found in time." The courthouse seemed impossibly imposing as Ray approached it on the morning of the hearing, Brusau walking confidently beside him, a deliberate choice the prosecutor had approved, allowing the judge and jury to see firsthand the living evidence of both cruelty and recovery. The German Shepherd's calm demeanor in the unfamiliar environment testified to how far he had come, his steady presence beside Ray drawing appreciative glances from court personnel as they made their way to the designated waiting area. Ray's testimony was brief but powerful, his voice steady as he described finding Brusau that winter night, the dog's critical condition, and the veterinarian's assessment that the animal had been suffering for months before rescue. When asked to identify the defendant, Ray did so without hesitation, noting the flicker of recognition and unease that crossed the man's face when Brusau, sitting quietly beside the witness stand, fixed him with a steady gaze that seemed to hold neither fear nor anger, just the dignified awareness of a survivor who had moved beyond his past. The defendant's conviction and sentencing, jail time plus a lifetime ban on animal ownership, brought a sense of completion to Brusau's journey from victim to survivor, a circle closing on the darkest chapter of his life. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by supporters from the Delivering Hope campaign and local media capturing the moment for the evening news, Ray knelt beside Brusau, cupping the dog's face gently between his hands. "It's officially over, buddy," he whispered, receiving a gentle lick across his cheek in response. "Only good days ahead now." And indeed, the good days unfolded with increasing frequency. Brusau romping joyfully through autumn leaves with Miguel and Sophia during weekend visits, accompanying Ray on his Saturday delivery routes after being officially registered as the company's Goodwill Ambassador, passing his therapy dog certification and beginning weekly visits to the Children's Hospital, where his gentle patience with fragile patients earned him the nickname Brusau the Healer among the medical staff. Each new accomplishment stood as testament to the resilience of his spirit, the capacity for renewal that lay beyond his traumatic beginnings. 2 years after that frigid March evening, when fate placed a delivery driver on an unfamiliar route and a desperate dog in his path, Ray Martinez stood at the edge of a sunlit park, watching Brusau run joyfully through an agility course at the annual Delivering Hope fundraiser. The event, now expanded to include participation from delivery companies across 3 states, had raised over $200,000 for emergency animal care and cruelty prevention programs, with Brusau serving as its living emblem, a powerful before and after story that opened hearts and wallets wherever it was shared. "He doesn't remember being that scared, starving dog anymore," Dr. Chen remarked, joining Ray on the sidelines as Brusau cleared a jump with graceful precision, his muscular body moving with confident power, his tail held high in evident joy. "That's the miracle of animals. They live so completely in the present once they feel safe again." Ray nodded, recognizing the truth in her observation, while silently acknowledging that humans could learn much from this capacity to move beyond trauma without forgetting its lessons. The changes in Ray's own life paralleled Brusau's transformation in ways both expected and surprising. His promotion to Community Outreach Coordinator at Northeast Ohio Deliveries had provided greater flexibility and financial stability, allowing him to pursue joint custody of his children. Weekends expanding to alternating weeks in the house that now truly felt like home to all of them. The walls once bare now displayed family photographs that increasingly included Brusau, his presence as integral to their definition of family as any human member. Most unexpected was the gentle romance that had developed between Ray and Dr. Chen, Ellie, beginning with coffee after Brusau's appointments, gradually evolving into family dinners that included the children and culminating in their recent engagement. "Brusau's our matchmaker," Ellie often teased, though both acknowledged the deeper truth. Their connection had grown from shared values revealed in that crucial moment when both chose compassion over convenience, commitment over detachment, action over apathy. Brusau's work as a therapy dog had expanded beyond the Children's Hospital to include veterans programs, where his intuitive understanding of trauma made him particularly effective with those struggling with PTSD. "He knows what it's like to survive something that changes you," one veteran explained after a particularly breakthrough session with the German Shepherd. "There's no judgment in him, just presence. He doesn't need you to be fixed to be worthy of connection." The educational program Ray had developed with local schools reached thousands of children annually, teaching empathy and responsible pet ownership through Brusau's story. Students would sit mesmerized as Ray shared before and after photos, the devastating images of the chained, emaciated dog contrasted with the healthy, vibrant animal that then walked into their classroom, embodying the transformative power of intervention and care. "One person can change an animal's whole life," Ray would tell them, "and sometimes that animal changes yours right back." Perhaps most profoundly, the ripple effects of Brusau's rescue continued to expand in ways Ray could never have anticipated that winter night when he made the split-second decision to investigate a sound behind an abandoned house. The Delivering Hope initiative had inspired similar programs at delivery companies nationwide, leveraging the unique daily presence of drivers in all types of neighborhoods to report suspected animal abuse or neglect, creating a nationwide network of mobile eyes attuned to animal welfare. On quiet evenings when Brusau lay contentedly beside him on the porch swing, Ray sometimes reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together: the co-worker's illness that changed his route, the package requiring a signature, the momentary decision to investigate a sound that could easily have been ignored. Some would call it coincidence, he once told a reporter doing a follow-up story on their journey. But I've come to believe it was something more like purpose. When asked what lesson he hoped people would take from Brusau's story, Ray's answer never varied: don't look away. This simple imperative had become something of a personal motto, applicable not just to animal suffering, but to human need as well. A reminder that noticing was only the first step. Action must follow awareness. Responsibility must accompany witness. "We're all connected," he would explain, his hand resting naturally on Brusau's head. "What happens to the most vulnerable among us ultimately affects us all." As the golden light of late afternoon stretched across the park, Ray called Brusau to his side, the dog responding instantly with the eager attention that still sometimes caught Ray by surprise. This magnificent animal choosing again and again to trust, to connect, to love, despite having every reason to fear human hands. In that daily miracle of resilience lived the true power of their shared story. The reminder that darkness need not define us, that the capacity for renewal exists in even the most wounded heart, that second chances multiply when given room to grow.